My name is Christopher Alexopoulos. Everyone who actually knows me calls me Chris. I'm 35 years old, and I live in Lincoln Park, on the north side of Chicago, Illinois. Nobody tells you that falling in love with the right person can still be the wrong decision. I didn't learn that in one dramatic moment. I learned it in pieces, small, quiet pieces I kept finding reasons to ignore. Because for the first time in my adult life I was successful, settled, and embarrassingly, genuinely happy. Her name was Vanessa. For 14 months I believed she was everything, and I had absolutely no idea what she was building behind my back. Before we go any further, if stories about lies, loyalty, and the kind of justice that arrives quietly through a side door are your thing, hit that like button, subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Now get comfortable. This one is going to take you somewhere. I run a commercial real estate firm, Alexopoulos Realty Group, headquartered in the West Loop. My father, Andreas, built the business from nothing in the 80s, back when he was still learning English from the radio and working double shifts to keep the lights on. I joined him at 26, and together we scaled it into the kind of operation that would have made my grandfather, God rest him, look down from wherever he is and feel satisfied. But money was never the point in our house. Family was the point, always family. We're Greek-American, 3 generations deep in Chicago. My parents still live in the same brick house in Lincoln Park they bought the year they got married. Sunday dinner is mandatory, non-negotiable, and conducted with the same seriousness as a board meeting. My mother, Athena, makes spanakopita from scratch every single week. She has done it since before I was born, and if you don't eat at least 2 pieces, she takes it personally. My uncle Spiro lives 12 minutes away, and has never once in his life required an invitation to appear at our door. We are loud, we are close, and we do not do anything halfway. So when I tell you that I met Vanessa at a charity fundraiser in the Gold Coast, and that within 3 months I was completely gone over this woman, I need you to understand what that means coming from me. I do not fall fast, I do not fall easy. I had been serious twice before, and both times ended the same quiet way, the way things end when 2 people finally admit they want different lives. Vanessa was different from the first night. She walked into that fundraiser in a black dress that probably cost more than my first car. Within 5 minutes she was laughing at my uncle Spiro's terrible joke about Greek yogurt. Then she turned to my mother and asked, genuinely asked, not politely asked, about the recipe for the appetizer she'd just eaten. My mother took her by the arm and talked to her for 45 minutes straight. I stood there watching it happen and thought, oh, so this is how it happens. We dated for 14 months. She met my family early, because in my world family arrives immediately. By month 2 she was at Sunday dinner. By month 4 she knew which chair belonged to Uncle Spiro and never once sat in it. My family absorbed her the way Greek families absorb people they love, completely, instantly, and with an enormous amount of food involved. I proposed on the rooftop of the London House Hotel, overlooking the river and the whole glittering spine of downtown Chicago, on a Tuesday evening in late spring. Ring, flowers, the entire production. She said yes before I finished asking. My mother cried when I called her. My father said, "Good, now bring her to every Sunday dinner so your mother can feed her properly." Uncle Spiro somehow already knew. To this day I have no idea how I was happy. Genuinely, completely happy. Here is the thing about Vanessa that I want you to understand before anything else, because it matters. She was not cold. She was not distant. She was warm and funny, and she made me feel consistently like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. So when the subject of her family came up, and it came up early, because in my world family comes up immediately, her answer didn't feel like a red flag. It felt like a wound. My parents and I don't have a relationship, she told me one night, about 6 weeks in. We were on the couch in her apartment in River North. Takeout containers on the coffee table. Some show playing that neither of us was watching. They were really toxic when I was growing up. Controlling, critical, my dad especially. I had to put serious distance between us just to function as an adult. I even changed my last name on social media just to get some breathing room. I looked at her. She wasn't performing it. Her eyes were steady and a little tired. The eyes of someone recounting something processed long ago, something that still cost a little to say out loud. "I'm sorry," I said, "because what else do you say? It's okay. It's just not something I talk about." "They won't be at the wedding, Chris. I need you to be okay with that." I told her I was okay with that, and I was, because I trusted her. Because she had given me exactly 0 reasons not to. What I didn't fully account for was my family. Not that they were hostile toward Vanessa. They weren't, not even close. But the Alexopoulos family operates on a specific cultural frequency, and that frequency includes a bone-deep need to know the people connected to the people they love. It isn't nosiness. It isn't judgment. We simply believe you understand a person better when you understand where they came from, who raised them, what table they grew up sitting at. And by the 11th month of our engagement, the silence surrounding Vanessa's family had begun creating its own kind of noise. It came to a head on a Sunday evening in late July. My mother had made pastizio, the real version, the one that consumes most of a Saturday, and we were all around the table in Lincoln Park. Me, Vanessa, my parents, Uncle Spiro, my cousin Peter Jr. and his wife Sophia. Everything was warm and ordinary until Uncle Spiro, operating as he always does with a complete disregard for social timing, set down his fork and looked at Vanessa. "Vanessa, sweetheart, I got to ask you something." She smiled. "Sure, Spiro, where are your people?" The table went quiet, the way tables go quiet when someone finally says the thing everyone has been carefully not saying. Vanessa's smile stayed in place, but her eyes shifted, just slightly. "My parents and I aren't in contact." "I've mentioned that." "I know you mentioned it. I'm asking about it." He wasn't being cruel. He was being Spiro. Because in our family, and I mean this with love, you do not marry into a family you have never met. It is simply not how we do things. Spiro, my father's voice, low, a single word. Spiro picked his fork back up. But the question was already on the table, and no amount of pastizio was going to bury it. Later, after Vanessa had gone home, my father found me in the kitchen. He poured himself a small glass of wine and leaned against the counter. "She's a good woman," he said, "not a question." "She is, I believe you." He nodded slowly. "But Chris, we are going to stand in a church. We are going to make promises in front of God, and everyone we know. And we are going to do that without knowing a single person from her side. Her parents are toxic, Pop. She had a hard, I hear you, I believe her." He set the glass down. "But toxic people still exist somewhere. They have an address." He looked at me steadily. "I'm not asking you to fix anything. I am asking you to know what you are walking into." I didn't say anything. He patted my shoulder once and went back to the dining room, and I stood in my parents' kitchen for a long time after that. But here is what I need you to understand. I still wasn't suspicious. Not of Vanessa. If anything, I was worried about myself. Because the one thought I could not shake, the one that kept surfacing on the drive home, was this. What if her parents take one look at me and decide I am not what they wanted for their daughter? I know how that sounds, coming from a man with a successful firm and a family like mine. But Vanessa lived inside a very specific world. Corporate wealth management, downtown Chicago. The kind of social circle where everyone has an MBA and an opinion about wine regions. Her apartment was decorated like a magazine spread. Her friends wore brands I had to look up. She carried herself with a particular polish that I found attractive. But that also, occasionally, quietly, made me feel slightly too much. Too loud, too Greek, too Spiro adjacent. What if her parents were the same way? What if they had money, standards, expectations I knew nothing about? What if they met me, and Vanessa saw the whole thing through their eyes, and something shifted? That was my actual fear. Driving north on Interstate 90, the following Saturday morning in August. Not that I would uncover a lie. Not that anything was wrong. I believed I was going to meet intimidating people who might not think I was good enough, that I would introduce myself, take whatever they gave me, and try to make a case for myself as the man their daughter had chosen. I genuinely thought I was the underdog in this story. Finding her parents had not required a private investigator. It required nothing but a routine piece of administrative boredom. By the 11th month of our engagement, Vanessa had moved into a high-rise in the West Loop that my firm owns and manages. Because the wedding was weeks away, our legal team needed her to formally sign onto the master corporate lease for tax purposes. Standard paperwork, the kind that crosses my desk a dozen times a year. On a Friday afternoon, my office manager dropped the processed file in front of me, and I glanced down at the state-issued ID Vanessa had uploaded to the portal. Vanessa Diane Kowalski. Not Sinclair, the name she used on social media, the name she'd introduced to my friends, the name on the wedding invitations. Kowalski. Now she had told me she'd changed her name online to escape her parents. So the name itself was not the shock. But sitting there with her real, legal name in front of me, for the first time, a thought arrived that I could not send away. I am about to marry a woman, and I have never once verified a single fact about the first 22 years of her life. Out of what I told myself was idle curiosity, I ran the kind of public records, searched my firm runs on prospective commercial tenants every single week. A few clicks led to an old property record, a dormant college-era social profile she hadn't touched in a decade, and a primary family address on Maple Street in Rockford, Illinois, about an hour and 40 minutes northwest on the interstate. I told Vanessa I had a Saturday property walkthrough. She kissed me goodbye without looking up from her laptop. The drive up was mostly me rehearsing introductions in my head and quietly dreading the moment someone opened a door and looked at me like I wasn't what they had in mind. I exited the highway into Rockford just before 10 in the morning and followed the GPS into a neighborhood of modest ranch homes. Clean streets, American flags, the kind of block where people know their neighbors' names and wave from the driveway. I slowed down, and then I found the house, a well-kept ranch home with a flower bed along the front walk and wind chimes on the porch. And in the front yard, moving slowly with a garden hose, was an older man in a Chicago Cubs t-shirt, reading glasses pushed up on his forehead, watering the flower bed with the unhurried patience of a man who had nowhere more important to be. This was not what I had pictured. I sat in the car for a full 5 minutes, recalibrating everything. There was no gate, no luxury car in the driveway, no indication whatsoever that the people inside that house had ever spent one moment of their lives worrying about whether someone else was good enough for anything. These were not intimidating people. These were regular people, and for one brief, uncomplicated moment I felt genuinely relieved. I got out of the car and walked up the driveway. He noticed me when I was about 10 feet away and squinted in that cautious way people do when a stranger approaches. "Help you with something?" I stopped, took a breath. "Sir, you don't know me. My name is Chris Alexopoulos. I'm engaged to your daughter, to Vanessa." Frank Kowalski dropped the hose. Not fumbled it, dropped it. Water pooled slowly across the driveway as he stared at me, and his face did something I was completely unprepared for. It crumbled, not with anger, not with suspicion, with relief, with 2 years of accumulated grief finding, at last, somewhere to land. "Diane," his voice broke on her name. "Diane, come outside." And in that single moment, standing on a driveway in Rockford, watching a retired postal worker try to collect himself, my entire understanding of my own life turned upside down. Inside the Kowalski house, everything I thought I knew about Vanessa came apart at the seams. Quietly, methodically, over coffee I didn't ask for and a plate of cookies Diane set out with shaking hands. The house was clean and modest and filled, completely filled with Vanessa. School photos, birthday pictures, a prom photo on the mantel, a college graduation portrait in which Frank and Diane stood on either side of her, beaming, Frank's arm around her shoulders, Diane's face so proud it almost hurt to look at. These were not the faces of abusive people. These were the faces of parents who missed their daughter. The story came out carefully, the way true stories do. Frank had worked for the Postal Service for 31 years. Diane had been a school secretary in the Rockford district for most of Vanessa's childhood. They had put her through the University of Illinois. Every dollar of it, no debt, not one loan, because they wanted her to walk into her adult life owing nothing to anyone. They were proud of that, deeply, quietly proud. When Vanessa moved to Chicago and began building her corporate life, things changed slowly. Calls got shorter, visits stopped. She started appearing in photographs online under a different last name, Sinclair, plucked from nowhere they recognized, at events with people they didn't know, wearing a version of herself they didn't quite recognize either. Then came the wedding conversation. Vanessa had asked them for $100,000. Frank, heartbroken, had countered with $15,000, everything they could give without gutting their retirement. And Vanessa's response, word for word, as Frank recounted it with his hands flat on the table. "If you can't invest in my future, you're not part of it." She blocked them that same night. Their calls, their texts, everything. Diane slid something across the table toward me, a birthday card. Sealed, unopened, stamped return to sender in red, and on the return address label, in Vanessa's handwriting, our address. Mine and hers, the apartment in River North. I stared at that red stamp for a long moment. Then, slowly, I pulled my phone out of my pocket and opened the text message Vanessa had sent me late the previous evening. The one I had read right before falling asleep. The one that had, more than anything, pushed me into the car that morning. Babe, great news. I reached out to my parents. They finally apologized for everything, and they want to meet you for lunch before they head out on a trip. I'm so excited for you to finally meet them. The kitchen was very quiet. I looked up slowly. Frank and Diane Kowalski were sitting directly across from me. The parents in question, completely unaware of the digital reality their daughter was constructing in real time. I turned the phone around and showed them the screen. Diane read it. She set the phone down gently and said nothing at all. Frank looked out the kitchen window, at the flower bed he'd been watering, when I walked up. I thought about my drive north, my rehearsed introductions, my quiet terror that I wouldn't be good enough for these people. I almost laughed. I almost actually laughed, because I had spent weeks worrying that Vanessa's parents might look down on me, that they might be too polished, too wealthy, too particular. And here they were in Rockford, in a ranch house on Maple Street, with wind chimes and a garden hose, and 2 years of unopened birthday cards. The person who had decided somebody wasn't good enough was never them, it was her. It had always been her. And just like that, the man who had driven up Interstate 90 nervous about making a good impression, that man was gone. The man who drove back to Chicago that afternoon was thinking about something else entirely. The difference between a good liar and a great one is that the great one never breaks character. Not at the dinner table. Not even while everything is quietly falling apart. I did not confront her that night. I want to be absolutely clear about that, because it matters. I pulled into our parking garage a little past 2 in the afternoon, sat in my car for 10 full minutes, and made a deliberate decision. Not yet. Not because I was afraid. Not because I doubted anything I had seen and heard in that Rockford kitchen. But because I am my father's son, and my father taught me something about the moment, just before a confrontation, that most people get wrong. He used to say, "Chris, the man who reacts first almost never wins. Let them finish the lie." A half-told lie is just an argument. A fully told lie is a confession. I rode the elevator up and stood outside our door for a moment. I could hear Vanessa inside, moving around, the low murmur of the television, completely unbothered, completely unaware. I put my key in the door and walked in. She was on the couch with a glass of white wine and her laptop open to a venue website. She looked up and smiled the way she always smiled, warm, easy, like I was the best part of her day. "How was the walkthrough?" "Promising," I said. "Long drive, though. You look tired. Want me to order something?" What I wanted was for her to explain to me why her mother's birthday card sitting in a kitchen drawer in Rockford where return address stamped across it in red. That is what I wanted. "Sure," I said. "Whatever you're in the mood for." I sat down next to her. She leaned her head briefly on my shoulder and went back to scrolling venue photos. I looked at the screen without seeing a single pixel of it. On the outside, a completely normal evening. On the inside, I was dismantling everything, beam by beam. That night, I lay in the dark and did what I do when I'm working through a complicated deal. I separated what I knew from what I assumed, and I built a timeline. What I knew, Vanessa's legal name was Kowalski. Her parents were Frank and Diane Kowalski of Rockford, Illinois, alive, present, and heartbroken. They had never abused her. Nothing Frank said, nothing Diane said, not one photograph in that house suggested anything other than two working people who had given their daughter everything they had. They had offered her $15,000 toward a wedding, been told it wasn't enough, and been erased that same night. What I also knew, Vanessa had sent me a text, while I was sitting in her parents' kitchen, telling me those same parents had apologized and wanted to meet me for lunch. Which meant she was already building the next floor of the lie. Which meant there was a next floor. Which meant there was someone she intended to bring to that lunch. Who? That was the question I fell asleep trying to answer. I didn't have to wait long. Over the next 3 days, I paid attention differently. Not suspiciously, I was careful about that. I did not go through her phone. I did not follow her. I simply listened. The way you listen once you finally understand that every conversation has been happening on 2 levels at once, and you have only ever been hearing one of them. I noticed she had started mentioning her boss, a man named Robert Whitfield, more than she ever had before. Casually. "Robert thinks the Henderson account will close early." In passing. Eleanor Whitfield was at that fundraiser too, apparently. Small mentions. Nothing alarming. Exactly the kind of thing a person drops into conversation when they are trying to make a name feel familiar before that name becomes important. She was warming me up to them. She had been doing it for weeks, and I had never noticed. Robert Whitfield. The following Tuesday morning, door closed. I looked him up from my office. Senior partner at Meridian Crest Wealth Partners, the firm in the Loop where Vanessa ran marketing. His photo on the company website showed a man in his late 50s, silver-haired, with the kind of effortless confidence that comes from decades of never having to justify himself in any room. His wife Eleanor appeared in a society column from a Chicago charity gala 2 years back. Pearls, perfect posture, the whole picture. A wealthy, well-regarded, childless couple, known around the firm, I would learn later, for treating Vanessa almost like the daughter they never had. There they were. Exactly the kind of people you would want, standing beside you, if you were trying to convince a traditional Greek-American family that you came from somewhere impressive. I sat back in my chair and stared at that corporate headshot, and I understood something about Vanessa that I had been circling for days. She wasn't only a con artist, she was a prisoner, locked inside her own immense insecurity. She had spent a decade reinventing herself in Chicago, sanding away every trace of Rockford, tailoring an identity to climb a social ladder my family never cared about, but her corporate world worshipped. When her father declined to empty his retirement account for a single day of theater, it was never really about money. In her mind, their modesty itself was the threat. A crack in the polished wealth illusion she had sacrificed everything, including them, to build. To keep the lie alive, walking away from them wasn't enough. She had to erase them. And then I thought about what she must have told the Whitfields. Because here is what I know about people like Robert and Eleanor. They did not get where they are by being careless. For two prominent, intelligent people to sit at a lunch table and introduce themselves as her parents, she had to have handed them a story that held together. Something sympathetic enough that they would say yes without asking too many questions. What did she tell them? I turned that over for 2 days. Then on Thursday morning, my phone buzzed with a reminder Vanessa had added to our shared calendar. Lunch, Robert and Eleanor. Gibson's, Rush Street. Saturday, 12:30. She had typed a note underneath. Can't wait for you to finally meet them, babe. This means everything to me. I stared at that note for a long time. This means everything to me. I thought about Diane Kowalski pressing a sealed birthday card across a kitchen table. I thought about Frank's face when he read that text over my shoulder. Yeah, I thought. I'll bet it does. I called my father that same Thursday from my car, engine running, in the parking structure beneath our building. He picked up on the second ring. I need to talk to you. Come to the house. 20 minutes later, I was sitting at my parents' kitchen table in Lincoln Park. The same table where Vanessa had charmed my mother, where Uncle Spiro had asked his question, where everything had looked completely normal 2 weeks earlier. And I laid it all out: Rockford, Frank and Diane, the birthday card, the text message. Robert and Eleanor Whitfield. My father sat across from me with his hands folded on the table and listened without one interruption. When I finished, the kitchen was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "What do you need?" 4 words, that's it. No lecture, no I told you so, no dramatic reaction. "I need to go to this lunch," I said. "And then I need to build something bigger." My father nodded slowly. "And the Kowalskis?" "I'm going back to Rockford after the lunch. I want to know if they're willing to be part of what comes next." He looked at me steadily. "And what comes next?" "A dinner," I said. "A real one, with the right people in the room." Another pause. Then my father stood up, straightened his jacket and said, "I'll talk to your mother about the restaurant." That was the entire conversation. My mother's reaction was slightly less contained. She came in from the living room, where she had apparently been listening to every word, which, in our house, is not eavesdropping, it is simply being present, and stood in the doorway with her arms crossed and an expression I can only describe as the specific fury of a Greek mother who has fed someone spanakopita in her own home and been lied to. "She sat at my table," my mother said. "She ate my food, Chris, in my house. And her mother is up in Rockford, with a birthday card that came back unopened." "I know, Ma." She looked at me for a long moment. Then she crossed the room and put both hands on my face. The move she has been making since I was 4 years old, and she wanted my full attention. "You fix this," she said quietly. "Not just for you, for them." Saturday came. Gibson's on Rush Street. Old money Chicago. The kind of room where the lighting is engineered to make everyone look slightly more important than they are. Vanessa had made the reservation, naturally. I arrived 5 minutes early and took the seat facing the door. They came in together. Vanessa in the middle, one hand looped through Robert Whitfield's arm, Eleanor on his other side. Vanessa was glowing. Robert moved with the unhurried confidence of a man who had never once questioned whether he belonged somewhere. Eleanor was all gracious smiles and careful posture. I stood when they reached the table. Big smile, firm handshake. "Chris," Vanessa said, her voice warm with a very particular kind of triumph. "This is my dad, Robert. And my mom, Eleanor, my dad, Robert, my mom, Eleanor, not Frank, not Diane." I shook both hands. "I've heard so much about you, both of you." I had heard nothing about them because they had not existed in this role until approximately 1 week ago. We sat. Menace opened, and for the next 20 minutes I watched Vanessa perform with a fluency that, under any other circumstances, I would have found genuinely impressive. She laughed at Robert's observations half a beat too quickly. She referenced shared memories with Eleanor. Trips, restaurants, little family moments. And Eleanor tracked along carefully, the way someone does when they are working from a script they only half memorized. Robert was smoother. He asked about my business, made informed comments about the Chicago commercial market, and generally conducted himself like a man who had done his homework and was determined to be convincing. They were all performing. The entire table was a stage, and I sat there eating pan-seared whitefish, being absolutely, perfectly charming. "So, Robert," I said, setting down my fork with the relaxed ease of a man with no concerns in the world. "Vanessa's told me so much about you. You've clearly been a huge presence in her life." Robert smiled. "She's been like family to us. Like family, there it is." "That means everything," I said, and I looked at Vanessa as I said it. She beamed back at me. "Keep smiling, sweetheart. I'll be honest with you both," I continued, leaning in slightly, the way I do in negotiations when I want someone to feel like I'm letting them in on something. "My family is traditional Greek on my father's side. We take the formal things seriously. My parents would never forgive me if we didn't do this properly." I paused. "We'd love to host an engagement dinner next Saturday. Nothing overwhelming. Family, a good meal, a toast. My parents simply need to welcome the people who matter to Vanessa before we get to the altar." Robert glanced at Eleanor. A half-second of silent calculation passed between them. "Then, we'd be honored." Vanessa grabbed my hand under the table so fast I felt it in my shoulder. "Perfect," I said. I smiled at her. She smiled back, the full, radiant, triumphant smile of a woman who believes she has just won. The trap was already built. She simply walked into it, smiling. The following 6 days I moved quietly and precisely. Monday, I drove back to Rockford. I called Frank from the driveway before I knocked. He opened the door before I finished knocking anyway. We sat in the same kitchen, same coffee, same table, and I told them everything. The lunch, Robert and Eleanor Whitfield, the performance, the engagement dinner I had arranged. And I told them what I had learned about the story Vanessa was telling. Through a contact at her firm, a careful conversation, I had confirmed what the Whitfields believed, that Vanessa's real parents had died years ago. That my family was old world, rigid, obsessed with pedigree, that she could not bear to face a traditional Greek wedding alone, with 2 empty chairs where her parents should be. And would they, the couple who had always treated her like a daughter, stand in as her honorary family, just this once, as a kindness? That was the genius of it, and the cruelty. Robert and Eleanor were not co-conspirators. They were her second set of victims. She had weaponized their childlessness and their affection, and she had buried her living, breathing parents in a story, declared them dead to 2 people and dead to the world. I told the Kowalskis I wanted them at that dinner. Diane's hands went still around her mug. "Chris, we don't want to make a scene, Diane." I looked at her directly. "My mother is going to stand in a church and welcome whoever walks through those doors into our family. She deserves to know who that actually is." I paused. "And you have spent 2 years mailing birthday cards that came back, unopened. You deserve to be in that room, not for drama, because you're her parents, and somebody needs to say that out loud." Frank reached over and covered Diane's hand with his. He looked at me. "What time should we be there?" Tuesday. I sat with my father and Uncle Spiro in the home office in Lincoln Park and briefed them fully. My father listened, asked 2 precise questions, then said, "I'll handle the restaurant," picked up his phone, and that was that. Uncle Spiro's reaction required immediate containment. I want to say something to her at the door, he grumbled, eyes narrowing. No, Spiro. You say absolutely nothing. I put both hands on his shoulders. I need you to do something that is going to be the hardest thing you have ever done. Not one word until I stand up to make the toast. He looked at the ceiling, looked at my father, chewed the inside of his cheek. Fine, he finally hissed. But I want a double portion of tiro pita before anyone else sits down, and I'm holding the door when we walk out. I looked at him and nodded. That I can absolutely get you. By Friday, every piece was in place. Pegasus Restaurant and Taverna in Greektown. My father's choice, and the right one. A restaurant that feels like somebody's home, not a stage set. The private dining room in the back. White linen, candles, warm light. My mother handled the menu personally and added a small framed photograph of my grandparents to the welcome table. Because, she said, they should be there. Frank and Diane Kowalski would drive down from Rockford on Saturday morning and check into a hotel in Oak Brook. Frank called me Thursday night to confirm. His voice was steady, careful, and at the end of the call, after we'd walked through the details, he said quietly, Chris, whatever happens in that room tomorrow, thank you for driving to Rockford, for knocking on that door. A pause. She picked a good one, even if she doesn't know it yet. I didn't know what to say to that, so I just said, I'll see you tomorrow, Frank. I pressed my suit Friday night and got into bed next to Vanessa's, who was already asleep, already dreaming about whatever version of tomorrow she had constructed in her head. I lay in the dark and thought about a man in a Cubs t-shirt watering a flower bed on Maple Street. A sealed birthday card with a red stamp across the front. A kitchen table where two people had been quietly waiting, for 2 years, for someone to finally show up. Someone had shown up. Tomorrow, so would they. You can build a lie as tall as you want. But the moment the right people walk through the door, the whole thing comes down. I woke that Saturday morning in September, with the kind of stillness that does not come from peace. It comes from certainty. I lay there listening to Vanessa in the bathroom. The shower, the hairdryer, the particular rhythm of a woman preparing for a performance she believes she has already won. And I thought about Frank Kowalski pressing his navy blazer in an Oak Brook hotel room. Diane at a mirror, holding herself together. Two people who had driven an hour and 40 minutes for a dinner their own daughter had no idea they'd been invited to. Get up, Chris. Let's go finish this. Vanessa spent 3 hours getting ready. 3 hours. I sat in the living room with football highlights on low and let her have every minute of it. She came out twice to ask my opinion, once about earrings, once about shoes, and both times I told her she looked beautiful, because she did. That was never the issue. The issue was everything underneath the beautiful. She wanted to leave early to check on the setup. I told her to go ahead. I had a quick call to make and would meet her there. She kissed my cheek, grabbed her coat, and walked out looking like everything in her life was exactly on track. The moment the door closed, I called Frank. He answered on the first ring. You good? I asked. We're ready. His voice was quiet and solid, the voice of a man who has decided something. Diane's dressed. We're ready, okay. When I text you, you walk in. It doesn't matter what's happening at the table. You walk in and you stand there. You don't have to say one word. A pause, Frank. Yeah, she's going to see you the second that door opens. I just want you prepared for. Chris, his voice stopped me. I've been prepared for 2 years. I've been prepared since the night she blocked us. I've been prepared every time Diane's birthday came around, and the phone didn't ring. A shorter pause. We'll be there. I held the phone for a second after he hung up. Then I put on my jacket, checked my inside pocket for the ring, and walked out the door. Pegasus on a Saturday evening is exactly what it should be. Warm, full, the smell of lemon and garlic meeting you at the door like an old friend. But the private room in the back runs on a different frequency, quieter, intentional. White linen, low light, tables arranged so that everyone can see everyone else. My mother had been there since 4 in the afternoon. When I walked in at 6:30, she was adjusting the centerpiece flowers with the focused energy of a woman who understands that the details of a room tell people how seriously you take them. She looked up and studied my face the way she has studied it since I was old enough to have something to hide. You okay? Yeah, Ma, you sure? I'm sure. She crossed the room and put both hands on my face. Looked at me a long moment. Your grandfather, she said quietly, used to say the truth always finds the biggest chair in the room, even when nobody invites it. She smoothed my collar. Let it sit down tonight. I nearly lost it right there. Nearly. My father stood near the bar with Peter Jr., already in his good charcoal suit, completely composed. He gave me one slow nod when I walked over, and that nod said everything. The room is set. Do what you need to do. Uncle Spiro sat at a side table with a full plate of tiro pita and the concentrated expression of a man honoring a solemn obligation. He looked up, pointed at the plate, then pointed at me. His version of I held up my end. Don't you forget yours. I almost smiled. They arrived at 7. I heard Vanessa's laugh in the hallway before the door opened. That specific social laugh, half a note higher than her real one. The laugh she deploys when she wants a room to feel like a party before she has even entered it. She came in first. Navy dress, hair, perfect, every detail exactly right. Robert Whitfield followed. Silver-haired, expensive suit, moving with the easy authority of a man who has never once doubted his right to be anywhere. Eleanor beside him, gracious and polished, pearls at her collarbone. Vanessa moved through that room like she owned it. She kissed my mother on both cheeks. She shook my father's hand with both of hers. She laughed at something, Eleanor said near the drinks table, and touched her arm warmly. She was magnificent, genuinely, terrifyingly magnificent. She slipped her arm through mine and leaned close. This is perfect, she whispered. Your family is incredible. This is everything I wanted. I know, I said. That's why I did it. She heard a compliment. I meant something else entirely. We sat. The food came out, grilled branzino, lamb chops, a spread my mother had personally designed, fresh bread arriving in cloth-wrapped baskets. The table filled with the warm noise of a real family dinner. Robert was smooth and engaged, asking my father about the business, with what appeared to be genuine interest. Eleanor complimented my mother on the choice of restaurant, and my mother received the compliment graciously, while privately thinking thoughts I will never fully know. Vanessa glowed, relaxed, victorious. I ate, I laughed at the right moments. I refilled glasses and asked questions and was, by every visible measure, a completely relaxed man enjoying a family dinner. My phone sat face down in my jacket pocket. I had one text to send, and I was waiting for the exact right moment. That moment came at 7:48, in the small lull between the main course and whatever was supposed to come next. The table was warm, the wine was flowing, and Vanessa was mid-law at something Robert had said. I slipped out my phone and typed one word to Frank now, then I stood up. The tap of a knife against a glass, that clean, clear sound that tells a room, stop. Listen. The table settled. Vanessa looked up at me with her full, radiant smile. The smile of a woman who believes the next 60 seconds will be a toast about how much this man loves her. I let the silence hold one beat longer than comfortable. I want to thank everyone for being here tonight. My voice was calm, measured, the way my father speaks when something actually matters. In our family, a dinner like this isn't just a nice evening, it's a declaration. It's us saying these people are real. These people matter. We don't do that lightly. I looked around the table slowly. My father taught me that the people you bring to your table tell everyone exactly who you are. I paused. So I want to make sure that tonight we have the right people at this table. I looked toward Tony, the restaurant manager, standing near the back wall. He had been briefed. He knew his cue. He walked to the side door and pushed it open, and in walked Frank and Diane Kowalski. Frank in his navy blazer, the one that didn't quite fit the way it used to, the one you could tell he'd owned for years and saved for occasions that mattered. Diane in a burgundy dress, a small purse clutched in both hands, chin up, moving with the quiet dignity of a woman who had decided she was not going to fall apart in public, no matter what happened next. They walked through that door into the silence of that room, and Vanessa saw them. I was watching her face. I had positioned myself specifically to watch her face. The color left it like a tide going out, fast, complete, absolute. Her lips parted. The hand holding her wine glass went perfectly still and the glass tilted. I reached over without looking at her, steadied it, and set it down gently on the linen. She turned to me. Her eyes were performing the rapid arithmetic of someone searching for the story that saves them. I could see it happening in real time. The hunt for the exit, the angle. The version of this she could still control. Chris. Her voice came out thin, barely a voice at all. I went to Rockford, I said quietly. Not loudly. I wasn't performing for the room. I was talking to her. 3 weeks ago, I drove up the interstate on a Saturday morning because I told myself, maybe I can fix this for her. Maybe I can give her family back to her as a wedding gift. I let that land. I found a man watering his flower bed on Maple Street in a Cubs t-shirt. I told him my name, and he dropped the garden hose. The room was a held breath. Your father worked for the Postal Service for 31 years, Vanessa. Your mother was a school secretary for most of your childhood. They put you through the University of Illinois without a single dollar of debt because they wanted you to have everything. My voice stayed level, even. They offered you $15,000, money out of their retirement, and you told them that if they couldn't fund your life, they didn't exist. Her mouth opened. You don't understand the whole. I sat in their kitchen. I said it quietly, like a door closing. I saw your school photos on the refrigerator. I held the birthday card you mailed back to our address without opening it. I paused, and while I was sitting there, you texted me. You told me your parents had apologized and wanted to meet me for lunch. I turned to Robert and Eleanor Whitfield. Eleanor had both hands pressed flat on the table, her face gone pale. Robert had gone absolutely still. Robert, Eleanor. My voice shifted into something quiet and respectful, because they had earned that. I know exactly what she told you. She told you her real parents passed away years ago. She told you my family was rigid and obsessed with pedigree, and she asked you, the two people who always treated her like a daughter, to stand in as her honorary family, so she wouldn't have to face a traditional Greek wedding alone. She weaponized your kindness and your standing to fill two empty chairs on a stage. I gestured toward the doorway where Frank and Diane stood, but those are her real parents. Right there, alive, and they have been trying to reach her for 2 years. Eleanor looked at Vanessa, a long, slow look, the kind that needs no words because words would be insufficient. Then she looked at Frank and Diane, and something moved across her face that was far worse than anger. It was recognition, the specific recognition of a woman who has just understood that the person she thought she knew does not exist. Robert said nothing. He folded his napkin and placed it on the table, the gesture of a man who is leaving and has decided there is nothing worth saying first. I turned back to Vanessa one final time. She had stopped searching for the exit. There wasn't one, and she knew it. She simply looked at me. Eyes bright, jaw tight, the full architecture of everything she had built reflected back at her from every face in that room. I grew up watching my father treat people, all people, like they mattered, I said. The man who parks the cars, the woman who cleans the office, the retired postal worker in Rockford who gives everything he has and gets told it isn't enough. I reached into my jacket pocket. That is the measure I was raised with. Not the address, not the job title, not the clothes. I looked at her. And by that measure, I don't know who you are. I took the ring out of my pocket. I set it on the white linen in front of her. Not thrown, not dramatic. Just placed, quietly, the way you set something down when you have been carrying it too long and are finally ready to put it down for good. Then I picked up the floral centerpiece from the middle of our table, white flowers. Simple, my mother's choice, and I walked across the room to where Diane Kowalski was standing. She was fighting it. You could see the effort in her jaw, her shoulders, the way she was breathing, short and careful, the way people breathe when they are holding something enormous and cannot afford to drop it in public. I held the flowers out to her. She looked at them, looked at me. And then Diane Kowalski, who had driven an hour and 40 minutes from Rockford, who had pressed her best dress and held her chin up through the hardest walk of her life, took the flowers and came completely apart. Not loudly, the quiet kind, the kind that comes from 2 years of accumulated grief finally finding somewhere to go. Frank had his arm around her before the first sound left her. His jaw was tight, his eyes wet, his chin steady. He pulled her in, looked at me over the top of her head, and then he did something I did not expect. He stepped forward, one step, Diane still tucked under his arm, and extended his free hand to me. I shook it. He gripped it hard, the grip of a man saying something his voice could not yet carry. I held it a moment, then I stepped back. My father was beside me. I don't know exactly when he moved. Andreas Alexopoulos materializes when it matters. It is simply what he does. He looked at Frank Kowalski for a moment. Then he stepped forward and offered his hand. I'm Andreas, he said. I should have met you a long time ago. I'm sorry for that. Frank shook it, swallowed once. Frank, a breath. Thank you for raising a man like that. My father glanced at me sideways, just for a second, just long enough. In 35 years, that is the proudest I have ever seen him look. My mother did not shake Diane's hand. She pulled her into a full embrace, Both arms, immediate, unconditional, the way Greek mothers hold people who need to be held. Diane held on. The flowers were still in her hands. We walked out together, the Alexopoloses and the Kowalskis. My mother's arm linked through Diane's. My father and Frank walking side by side with the quiet ease of two men who had just recognized something in each other. Peter Jr. holding doors, Uncle Spiro bringing up the rear, exactly as promised. Spiro stopped at the main door and turned back just once. I looked back too. Vanessa was sitting at the center of that long table, in her perfect dress, inside her perfectly constructed life. The ring on the linen in front of her, the centerpiece gone. Robert and Eleanor Whitfield stood at the far end of the room, Eleanor's coat already on, Robert's hand at the small of her back, neither of them looking in Vanessa's direction as they moved toward the exit. Her friends, the polished crowd she had curated and performed for, and built her entire second identity around, sat frozen in their chairs with the particular discomfort of people who have just witnessed something they cannot unknow. Nobody went to her. Nobody pulled her aside. Nobody offered a version of events that made it better. Nobody played the part she needed them to play, because there were no more parts available. The whole cast had walked out. She just sat there, seen, completely, finally, irreversibly seen. Uncle Spiro looked at her for a long moment. Then he shook his head once, slow, almost sad, and let the door close behind him. Outside on the sidewalk, September air cool and clean, Greektown moving around us like the city had no idea what had just happened inside that restaurant. I stood next to my father and breathed. He put his hand on the back of my neck, the thing he has done since I was a kid, and said nothing for a moment. Then, your grandfather would have done the same thing. That was it. That was all he said. It was enough. Across the sidewalk, Frank Kowalski was looking up at the Chicago skyline, with Diane tucked under his arm, the white flowers still in her hands. Both of them breathing the same cool September air like people who had just been handed back something they had given up on ever seeing again. Frank caught me looking. He nodded once. Not a thank you nod. Something there isn't quite a word for. I nodded back. Some deals you close for profit. Some you close because there is no version of yourself you can live with that walks away from the table. That night I closed the most important deal of my life, and I didn't make a single dollar. I want to leave you with what this whole thing actually taught me, because it was never really a story about a broken engagement. For weeks afterward, people asked me if I was angry, and the honest answer surprised even me. Mostly, I was sad. Sad for Frank and Diane, obviously, but sad for Vanessa too in a way I didn't expect. Because somewhere along the line, she had absorbed the most corrosive lie our world tells. That where you come from is something to be ashamed of. That a ranch house in Rockford is worth less than a condo in River North. That a postal worker's 31 years of showing up in the rain and the snow count for less than a corner office. She didn't just lie to me. She lied to herself first for a decade, until the lie needed victims to survive, and she fed it the two people who loved her most. Here is what I know now, and what I hope you carry out of this story. The measure of a person has never been the address, the title, or the clothes. It is how they treat the people who can do nothing for them. Frank Kowalski, standing in a driveway in a Cubs t-shirt, had more dignity in his garden hose than that entire private dining room had in its wine list. And the people who love you for exactly where you come from. Not in spite of it, those people are not an embarrassment to be managed. They are the only wealth that cannot be faked, borrowed, or performed. If you still have people like that in your life, parents, grandparents, the ones whose calls you've been letting go to voicemail because life got busy or because you've been building some shinier version of yourself, call them. Tonight, before the birthday cards start coming back unopened, because I watched a man cry over a dropped garden hose, for the simple reason that a stranger said his daughter's name out loud. Nobody should have to wait 2 years for that. Frank and Diane come to Sunday dinner in Lincoln Park now, about once a month. Diane and my mother trade recipes. Frank and Uncle Spiro argue about the Cubs and the White Sox, which my father moderates like a UN summit. It turns out family, real family, is not something you inherit or perform. It is something you recognize, and once you recognize it, you hold the door open. Some people lie to erase the ones who love them. She built a whole life on top of that erasure. And on a Saturday night in September, in a private dining room in Greektown, Chicago, every single floor of it came down. If this story moved you, hit that like button, subscribe, and drop a comment below. Tell me where you're watching from, and tell me this. If you had found that birthday card, what would you have done? I read every comment. I'll see you in the next one. This story was written, revised, and lived with the old-fashioned way, drafted by hand, read aloud at my own kitchen table, and shaped by real conversations about family, pride, and forgiveness. Names and identifying details have been changed to protect the people involved. If it reminded you of someone you've been meaning to call, that's not a coincidence. That's the point.